flow consciously.
Hi, I'm Jonté.
Hello, I'm Sandy.
Hi, I'm Sara.
And we are the Wavelengths.
Hi, everyone. We have decided to do a podcast on going with the flow consciously. And part of the reason is because we did not have an interview to post this week. And part of the reason for today's topic is because I tend to be real structured. Part of that, is I was a teacher at one time, work with kids a lot and young adults. And so I really like structure and I like planning things out. And we had kind of hoped that we'd be able to do an interview or a conversation with one of our speakers that you've been watching, I hope. And for a lot of different reasons, life issues, obligations popped up for both those who are ready and able to be part of our conversations, but life happened and we couldn't do it or whatever for a lot of different reasons. So it just made sense because this was kind of like, I was kind of itching because it's like, oh my gosh, we don't have a presentation. We don't have a podcast to post. And whereas Sandy and Jonté, I think they both would say they tend to just go with the flow. It's a little more challenging for me to do that.
Yeah, I tend to go with the flow consciously.
So hence the name of today's podcast. And it's interesting because while we have some ideas about what we want to talk about today, we're just going to go with the flow. So Sandy, I think you're next, unless, Jonté, I guess just jump in whenever we...
I'll just go with the flow of the energy and follow the conversation and interject as I feel guided.
That works.
Well, when we were, you were talking about going with the flow, and I had just had a conversation with several people, and they were giving some information about the workshop that they had just been to, a meditation workshop, and part of it was about being still and being in motion was our practice. And we are still in meditation, and we also are in motion a lot of times with guided movements of some kind, a guided meditation walk, working with the energies that are around us, and that are our own energies, but also interacting with other energies around us. So, which sort of makes perfect sense. You have to be very quiet to know what's going on around you, and then being able to flow with that energy and to be positive with that energy, and to know that you're connecting with the right energies. There are lots of different energies, but you always want to connect to the most positive and work with that, because we all tend to be so negative all the time.
Right, especially here on the planet.
Trying to, have the highest thought and to connect with the highest energies for our highest good. And so it was a very interesting conversation and information that she gave us, but it made perfect sense after 30 years of meditation. It never occurred to me that our meditation was based on stillness and movement.
Right.
What we do, and it was like, oh yeah, of course, that's exactly what we do, and it puts it in a great perspective. And sorry, I have a dog in here who wants to take this. And so that is going with the flow and the whole conversation. So I thought it was a perfect match with what we were doing today.
It is. It's interesting because I've been consciously meditating 50 years. Prior to that, when I was a child, I would, in looking back, I would actually meditate, but I didn't know that's what it was called. And it was very spontaneous and usually around, oh, I'm feeling really tired, let me energize kind of meditation. So it was more like a power nap, but they hadn't coined that phrase yet, so we couldn't call it that. And I wouldn't have known what to call it anyway. But in thinking about today's theme, just while you were sharing that information, I realized that once I quote unquote consciously developed a practice of meditation, and I experienced several different forms and many over the years. But I was just thinking back, a lot of those first, I don't know, 20, 30 years probably, was meditating with a focus of obtaining an experience. So meditating to calm down, meditating to connect with source, meditating to astral travel, or whatever it was. There was a meditating to get deeper within myself. And when you were sharing, I was realizing, oh, it's only really in the last maybe 15 years or so where I've been meditating to be still, like you said. And what I noticed in thinking about that, it's that meditating to be still that has enabled me to more effectively tune in with the flow of energy, which I call source, energy from the source. And then I use my heart chakra, for lack of a better term, but how I respond to that energy. If it brings me joy or that solid connectedness, then I follow where the energy takes me. And it doesn't always make sense. I know you've made comments about how I just talk with anybody and how it's perfect, Sandy, right? And
yes,
especially how I just recently made a trip for a family emergency, and talking to people on the plane, right? Or random people that make a comment to me out of the blue. There when we were going through TSA on the way flying back home, a gentleman right next to me started talking with me out of the blue. And I don't even remember what we said, but it's like just going with the flow. All right. He asked me something. I responded. And we had a short interaction that may have meant nothing, but I don't know how that impacted him. Right? I don't know, because I know I've read and I've heard that where we are in our own energy field impacts those we're around. So if we're angry, that's going to impact the people and touch the people around us, even if we say nothing. If we're in joy, that's going to impact the people around us. If we're centered, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you, Sandy, for bringing that up, that whole stillness and movement, because this is, to me, another level of what I've been experiencing. And I find life goes much smoother if I just go. And that's not to say I can't plan, because I do like to plan. Yeah, I believe. Right. I believe one needs to have at least a few goals so that you can work towards them. But at the same time, in going with the flow of source, maybe my way of going towards those goals is not the most efficient, effective. And I have found that going with listening to that inner voice where the energy is flowing, just paying attention, is often, when I look back and can see the whole picture from I'm on the other side perspective, it seems that it's really much more effective.
Much more effective to just set the intention, have the goal in your heart, and trust source to unfold it in your experience.
And try not to question it.
Right. That's
my challenge.
point. Me too.
Not go into fear, like, oh my gosh, maybe my novel isn't supposed to be published because I don't have an agent yet, right? It's like, well, I've only sent out to like 15 agents, 10 agents. Maybe it's not the right agent yet.
Right. Maybe it's not the right agent.
So it's really interesting how that works. The other thing that I'd like to pull in at this moment is tarot readings or astrology readings or anything along that line, and how that relates to going with the flow consciously. So any thoughts on that?
Well, yes, anything that you have, anything prop that you have that you use, whether it's a pendulum or tarot cards, or just being able to stop and being quiet to listen to what's being told to you, psychic sort of stuff, helps you focus, helps you to put you in a light trance to be able to listen to what's going on and let everything resonate with everything. I was watching a show yesterday talking about the harmonic resonance, which is part of what our name is, wavelengths, which is the harmonic frequencies of everything, and everything sort of coordinates with the harmonic resonance, and everything else around it starts, whatever the stronger vibration is, everything else around it starts being in that resonance. So it's amazing how that works. So once you can be quiet enough and listen to really what's going on, then you can flow with what's going on around you and with what other people are wanting. And then with you, then you can figure out what's you and what's not you, and which one you want to go with, and what's the highest and best feeling of what's going on. And so it's amazing how things just sort of flow and flow into one thing. If you have a question, it's like, oh, there's the answer. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. That's exactly what we were talking about. And it just flows on by.
Yeah. For some reason, when you were sharing the vibrational frequency stuff, two things came up in my mind. Do you remember those? I don't know if they were officially research studies, but they were certainly activities that explored harmonic dynamics, where they had the big drum and they put sand, fine sand on top of the drum, just kind of gently spread it out. Huh?
The cybernetic resonance.
And then it's like the sand was in stillness. And then they'd play a note on a synthesizer or an actual instrument or something like a tuba, I don't know, flute. And they'd play it continuously, and it would cause the drum head to vibrate. And that would cause the sand to create a pattern. You remember those?
I remember that. Yeah.
So it's like stillness and then moving into harmony. That's really cool. Motion into harmony. So maybe going with the flow is a way of creating harmony. That might be a way to look at it.
Well, and whatever is playing, your brain gets entrained to what's going on, and the more quiet you can get it, which is part of meditation, is just becoming quiet. And it helps entrain you and helps the healing of your body and as well as your mind, and that the more you can get into that flow, the more it can, I guess, like reset, hitting a reset button of, okay, let's start all over and get you a better, higher thought instead of a more
Right.
disease thought or more negative thought, or a thought that is not in resonance with us, which is what causes disease, that we're not in resonance with what's going on around us, or going in the direction that we really want to go in. So then we fall out of balance, fall out of resonance, and then we have a hard time trying to figure out which way to go. So
Huh. Yet taking that time to be in stillness strengthens the muscle that, not literal muscle, but an energetic muscle, I guess, that enables us to tune in to the natural flow of life and source and all of that. God.
flow with what the direction that our heart really wants to take us, and the direction that we really want to go in, and what we really want to achieve.
Yeah.
If we're not going in that direction one way or the other, then it's harder, and things, the most positive things don't start happening with us.
Right. And you don't have to force it. It's like you set the goal, you visualize the fulfillment of that goal, and then listen as to how to move towards it.
And that's the inspired action.
All right. So you're doing something with your hands, Jonté. What you doing?
Well, as Sandy, as you were speaking about harmony and flow, I just felt in that place of stillness, and then my hand started flowing and sending you all frequencies or light codes through my hands of energy to support the feeling of being in flow for whomever is wanting to receive that.
Our hand puppets are talking.
Yeah.
I talk with my hands too, but
yeah,
you're doing a little bit different, but still, it's the hand puppets are out.
A hand puppet, right? It's not jazz hands though, right?
It happens a lot of times when I
hands, but
anyway.
Well, that's part of going with the flow, of feeling where the energy is, and knowing that your highest thought is to send good, positive energy to someone. Then your hands just automatically go up to start sending it, and which is one way to send good energy and positive energy. So,
or as you say, good juju.
Juju.
Good juju.
Good juju. So, do you guys perceive that the flow has an ebb? Like, what do they call it? Ebb and flow? Like the moon, it ebbs, wanes, and ebbs and wanes.
Of course, otherwise it would be just a straight energy flow, and nothing else would go on with it. Part of movement is being able to ebb and flow, which is how you get things to move along.
Yeah.
So that would mean that we also, if we choose to relate to movement through this world, sometimes it requires us to be in stillness.
Right.
Yeah, and I think most of us have a really hard time with just waiting and being in stillness until you are inspired to move. And that's what most of us have a really, really hard time with. And so it's like, oh, we got to be doing something. We got to be busy. We got to go. And and then we find ourselves in the
Well,
wrong direction, the wrong place, because we're just going and we're forced to, oh, we got to keep up, and it's like,
And then we're
no,
stressed.
then we're stressed and everything else that goes along with it. And part of our new direction is to, what the pandemic I think has helped us with, is to be quiet, be still, listen to what's going on around us, and know the best direction that for that person is. It's not the same for everyone. Some people do need that high energy, go, go, go. And then some people just, it's like, that's just really not the best thing for me to do.
Right.
And, you know, they take off in a van and go travel the world, or they, you know, work from home where it's more quiet, and they could do more things that will support them more. So everyone's sort of learning a new language of what's the best for them, because they've been quiet for 2 years, or forced to be quieter than
Right.
have
Right.
been. And which doesn't always mean you have to stop and you have to wait, but just being a lot more still helps know what direction to go in. And you know, so that's, and to be in a more positive, even though we're not all in a positive place right now, I do think most of us really do want to go in a more positive direction. And the fear and the I don't necessarily want to say hatred, but the fear and
Well, hate comes from
confusion.
fear.
Huh?
Hate
The what?
hate is from fear. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the fear and the angerness and the fear and the knowing what to do, we can being quiet. And I think that's part of what the anger is not being able to being confused about what the stillness is about. And so they don't know what to do with themselves. So then they get angry because they're not listening very well. And the
yeah.
more you can listen to the direction you need to go in. And I think it is always a more positive direction, but we do get caught up with everyone else's flow, which causes a negative thing, or go of us going in a different direction than we really want to, or this is what our society says to do, and you're like, that, but that's really not me, and then you're the outcast.
Right.
And
Right.
but you know, having compassion for everyone to do what they need to do, and it's always slightly different. Even if you find a group, find your tribe, it is always, you're still a little bit different than everyone else around you, and which is what makes you you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
we're still working on heading in that direction, and having more acceptance in that, and finding out what direction that is, and letting everyone else be in their own direction can be quite challenging sometimes. And I think that's the people who are still living in that fear are having a hard time.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we all have challenges off and on anyway.
Yes,
So
that's part of life, and that's what we're here for, is to overcome those challenges and to work out those challenges. And it's easy enough to say that when you're in the middle of it. It's
right.
always
And
like,
it's
why?
interesting with the thing, a couple of points, that thoughts that came up while you were sharing that. One is, especially during the teenage years, it's like we want to be the same as everyone else, right? Typically, that's not everyone, but, or the exact opposite, which is essentially the same thing, just on the flip side, wanting to be completely different from everyone else. None of it is
Want to find your group.
pardon?
you still want to find your group, like being the.
You still want to find your group,
or
either
whatever.
the rebels, yeah, either the rebels or whatever the group is. And it's interesting. Of course, the teenage years are about figuring out who you are. But because of the way our brains and our personalities and our belief systems develop, we are all unique. And yet we have much in common. And it's through listening to one's inner flow without that anger influence it, without the hate, the anger, any of that influencing listening to the flow, because those emotions, any extreme emotion is of course going to impede being able to hear or sense the flow of energy, because it'll distort it. Even if you're super happy, right? When it's in a human emotion, it can distort interpretation. And of course, interpretation is part of figuring out, you need to have effective interpretation, so clear interpretation. But I was thinking, even as we get older, there's a tendency to want to be like all of our peers or whatever our group is. And I think our strength comes from when we honor who we are and go with the flow that's pertinent to us as being humans in this 3D expression. So thoughts on that?
Well, I do think we all want to find our own group, but within that own group, there's always more groups, and you can. The thing is, you can join as many groups as you'd like. Right. You don't have to just stick with one, and only one. One thought, one way of being, and you can explore different ways. And we all have our own ways of being. It changes every day. We all have like different people inside of us that want to express themselves, and our job mostly, and this was part of what the workshop conversation came out of, was that we do have lots of people inside of us, and it is following the most positive in each of those cases, and to let each of our different selves come out, and to embrace even the negative, but just don't let the negative take over, that we be conscious enough to let to embrace the negative and know that it's there and accept it, but not, choosing not to follow that, and knowing that you don't have to follow it, and that it's giving you, being negative gives you information, but you don't have to live in that place. You can choose to live a more positive, a less fearful place, and a more positive and more loving place to come from. And then you can follow that one, but you can acknowledge that, yes, in this case, or, this came out, and accept it and forgive it, or forgive that part of ourselves, and go on. But we don't have to continuously live there and choose it.
Well, I know a lot of people that I've talked with are still learning that all these aspects within ourselves are, even the ones we call negative, are aspects of our personality that developed from birth on, not all at the same time, but every time we'd have an experience, let's say it was traumatic. And of course, trauma is individual to the person. So if somebody slammed a door really loudly right behind you, some people would be traumatized by that. Others would be startled, but it was no big deal. They just move on. So we all have different responses to our environmental experiences. And whenever we
for all sorts of different reasons, and one time that startled could be dramatic, and one time it's just startled, and sometimes it just doesn't even phase
right,
you.
Yeah,
right.
that's,
Go ahead, Jonté.
oh no, I was just acknowledging that in reference to, you know, my own experiences, just thinking back on, you know, different degrees of feeling startled or traumatized, and it, you know, and often depended on where I was in my consciousness at the time of the you know, of the event, which thought stream I was flowing into. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah. So, but what happens from the psychological point of view, or the psychological dynamic, whenever we are startled and it becomes a trauma, or have an experience that becomes a trauma, regardless of what the experience is, it's like a part of us literally gets frozen. And when you think about it, especially from a meditation perspective and the breathing perspective, our bodies are designed to breathe diaphragmatically. So it's just the diaphragm expands, it opens up the lungs, the air goes in, the diaphragm contracts and pushes the air out. And there's a whole lot of positive things just on a physiological level that goes with breathing. Well, we could do that another time, but that's just information. But when we get startled or traumatized, most of us go, right? And hold our breath and lock it into this upper body part, where the shoulders, the top part of the lungs. And over time, we learn to breathe shallow. And then when someone chooses to meditate and start breathing deeper, it starts releasing all of these traumas. And sometimes it's no big deal. And other times it's challenging, because the skill set that we had, the coping skills that we had in that moment, were much more limited than, say, right now as an adult. So anything that happens in childhood, obviously you're going to look at it from the perspective of a child, which is a very limited, in a way, perspective. In other ways, a child's perspective is open and loving and all that, but in terms of dealing with the world, it's limited because they have less experience. And as we grow, we have greater capacity to learn new coping skills that are more effective. But what happens, we lock that down, it goes unconscious, we create a belief surrounding that, and all of that gets locked in, and that's what ultimately creates our fears. So getting back to what you were talking about, the fears and how those, it's healthy to be aware of those fears when they come up, but absolutely right. You don't have to act upon those fears. None of us have to act. All we got to do is understand this is a normal process of healing, being able to see our fears. And when it gets triggered, when we get triggered, it's about, we use this in with therapeutic techniques. Breathe. So you get triggered, you breathe, but pay attention. Love that part of yourself, because it was doing, at the time that belief and that response locked in, we were doing the best we knew how.
Oh,
right, the best we knew how. So it's an opportunity. When these fears come up, it's an opportunity. And I think that's how Source works. I think that, or God, some people call Source God. I think that's how God works, is to bring up these moments where we have gone into fear, because that was our coping skill level at that time. And it's coming up into our awareness so that we can breathe into it, accept that part of ourselves, and learn a new way to respond. And that requires listening and going with the flow from a conscious perspective, as opposed to a knee-jerk reaction kind of thing. So You do it.
Well, in listening, you pretty much have to be still to listen to what's going on.
Right.
So stillness and the motion of going with the flow and being still, of listening to what's going on. So you're still being still and going with the motion. And
Yeah.
so yeah, there's all sorts of levels of in that. So
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I just wanted to bring it up so that our listeners could maybe develop that correlation, be aware of that correlation.
well, and just
why
like
it's so-
every
I'm
and
sorry.
just like everything else, it comes around. Even though we think we've mastered something, it comes back around. If that's our life lesson, that we keep having to learn it on a new level, and we usually get very upset that I have to learn it again. I thought I got this, and it's yes, but you're coming around the mountain again. So yes, you did master it at that level, and a new level is coming up. So it's just like learning math in school, or English or whatever that you're learning in
Right.
school. You have
Well,
certain
even just
things that
walking.
you learn throughout your whole life, throughout all the grades of school. And since this life is a school, I mean, we're still coming around learning those lessons. And yes,
Yeah.
we've learned them, and we've learned them to the best of our ability, to our skill level, and then we learn something else, and then we come back around that mountain. But we're on a different level. So but we get upset because we think it's the same level and not
Right.
we haven't grown any.
Yeah.
So then we
Instead of
get locked in that
realizing.
fear again.
Yeah. So I know, because I experience the world vibrationally. The differences, talking about that cycle around the mountain, although the image I tend to do is like a tornado, or the spiral around the caduceus, the medical caduceus, or a DNA strand. It's the same shape, right? But it's always cycling up. So while we may deal with the same basic pattern of challenges or issues, every time we hit that, it's at a higher frequency level. It's been my experience.
That's been my experience too. And I feel it as the shape of the spiral. And of course I also hear them as frequency tones. So it's interesting to acknowledge these different
Right.
perspectives.
So
Well, even the scales of music, you go up in music, and each set has its own. You have the same letters, but it goes up in tone, and so everything is so it is different, but it is the same, but it is different. And so
right.
knowing
Right.
things are the same, but they are different, and being able to see them from a different perspective can be a really difficult thing, of knowing, oh, I already know this. Oh, I can just see a little bit more of it. And it can open up the whole world to you, of being able to see it.
Right.
And just a small little crack can give you a lot more information than what you've ever had. And then it's like, oh, I can do this with it. And I remember being in a meditation, and the meditation leader, we were all sitting there, and someone came and sat right in front of someone, and I could see how frustrated she was. And the leader kept going, and he saw it too. He said, just move over, just scoot your little bench over just an inch. And she refused to do it. She was going to be the martyr of the whole situation, of no, I'm going to stick it out. No, I'll accept this. And he kept saying, just move over just a little bit. And finally, after about the third time, she goes, just fine. And she did it. And her whole being, you could just see her whole being just open up, going, oh, it was that simple to change my whole world, that now I can see. I don't have to be frustrated with the person in front of me who did something totally innocently. I was sitting right in front of her. He didn't know that he was blocking her way. And instead of saying something, or, something that she had control over, of just moving an inch over, it's like, it just opened up her whole world. And you could just see it. It just relaxed her whole body. And she was like, oh my God, I can see what's going on now. And she wasn't stuck in her, I'm going to be a martyr. I'm going to suck it up. I'm going to,
Right.
I'll just take this anger and just hold on to it. And this frustration that she was having, that she was, she was stuck in this frustration, that she could actually had control over changing it a little bit. And if she couldn't, she could easily have asked them to move over a little bit. But, you do something that you can do a little bit first, and then you can go and change it otherwise. But we forget this in the middle of all of our being in the middle of a frustrating, fearful situation, that we do have control over. We don't have to sit there and take it.
I think it requires developing a habit of looking at oneself first whenever we get frustrated or angry or whatever. And that's part of going with the flow consciously, is like, for instance, when I get angry, and I've had this happen, when I get angry, sometimes I just go with the anger and get stuck in it, in the past anyway. And now it's like, wait a minute, what is it that I'm wanting, and how am I contributing to what I don't want? And how can I then step forward and create what I do want in a way that's harmonious with me and everyone around? It's totally changed my life. I actually had an interaction with someone almost a year ago, and it was a very angry exchange. And but while I was going through this, I'm thinking, what is it that I'm wanting? Of course, first, we can't really communicate effectively when we're out of balance, when we're in our emotions. So I went off to be by myself a bit. And then I asked, what is it that I want? And once I clarified that, then it was like, how am I not giving that to myself? Because that's an important piece, because the world is a reflection of our internal world, right? And as soon as I cleared that, figured that out, and then I could figure out, okay, what's my next step? I just became, even though the person I was interacting with was very, very angry, I had clarified it for myself, and I just became very centered. And I'm like, I know what to do now. That's another way of consciously going with the flow. It's like, I have this anger coming up. I'm interacting in a dynamic that I don't like the way I'm behaving, because that isn't where I want to be. So I take the time out to figure out what I do want. And then I just totally centered. And it didn't matter what that other person said. I knew I was doing the right thing for me.
Well, and they get to choose to either come along with that flow or not.
Right.
And
it doesn't matter what they choose.
And you can choose to not go back and go, you have to change with me. You have to get it too. It only stops your flow, and they will either meet back up with you on another flow, another iceberg that you're going along on.
Right.
They'll meet back up with you or not.
Yeah.
And
it's fine, because I'm doing what's right for me. So I mean, I didn't realize that when we came up with the name, going with the flow consciously, of today's conversation, but it's really accurate on so many different levels of expression. It's not just tuning in to the flow of source, but it's also tuning into our own individual flow and honoring that.
But that is our source.
I'm sorry?
I said our source, ourselves, or what we're doing.
Yeah.
So we
Jonté,
can do it on a smaller level or a bigger level. Sorry.
or anywhere in between. Or anywhere in between. Jonté, you were about to say something?
I forgot how I was gonna string that together.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Well, that's another way of going with the flow, right? I know as I get older, I have what I think are like amazing, profound thoughts while someone else is talking, not just now, but any conversation. And then it'll go out of my head. And it just took me
Well,
a bit of time to learn
and
it
that's
wasn't ready to be said.
and that brings up an interesting point, because while you were sharing a lot of this, Sandy, and while we were talking, I could feel the thought forms of and it's like attaching words to these thought forms to express them, and sometimes rather than worrying about that, just be in the flow of feeling the energy as
Yeah,
you're listening to someone,
exactly.
and not worrying about how to put language to it sometimes is also part of being in flow.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Yep.
So I had in trying to prepare, because me, the planner, right? In trying to attempting to prepare for today in figuring out, oh, what are we going to talk about? Because I wanted to control a little instead of just going with the flow, but that's not always a negative thing. It's
No.
neither negative or positive, actually. I think it's a neutral thing. And but it seems that I kind of would like to go into. I like to Google and research a lot, and have the thought, because we're all kind of into astrology, and just in terms of exploring, not studying per se, but exploring, looking at what other folks have to say. So I came across an article on current planetary influences for March and April. And obviously April is what we're looking at because March is gone. But got that from www.astroinfinity.com. Astroinfinity spelled ASTROINFINITY. So current planetary influences, because part of going with the flow is also being aware of what's going on around us, right? So if I'm in a work environment, it seems logical, if I want to keep working in that environment, to be aware of the flow of the workplace, right? So we're all part of this world. And so it might be interesting to be aware of the flow of energies that have a worldwide influence. Earlier, Sandy, you said something about with COVID, this is giving us an opportunity to look at ourselves, become more harmonious with ourselves. I don't remember exactly what you said. Do you remember that?
It has to be still to listen to what is going on with ourselves and what's going on around us, and to be able to choose something new, because everyone's had to stop and get a new perspective on things.
So this article addresses exactly what you said. Here, and this is, I only am looking at things related to April, right? Because March is gone. But I found it very interesting that here's what whoever wrote this said, quote, transformation is going to happen.
Yes.
And that's even with doubts and stress. And the outcome is going to be better than one believes or thinks. end quote. And then a little bit later, she talks about, or I don't know if it's a she, but I'm going to say she, what the planets are, and goes on to say, quote, "This is generating good karma for the collective. We are going to do what is right relationship," end quote. And so going with the flow, to me, means being in right relationship with self, all the way, which is the individual, all the way up to source, which is the collective, and having that stillness helps us do that. So I find it interesting that not really surprising that at least this person's interpretation of the planetary influences are supporting that opportunity, like you were saying with COVID.
Well, now is our chance to change. And once everything had to come to a stop, and to hit the reset button. And I was with someone yesterday who kept going, "Oh, I'm ready for everything to get back to normal." And it's like, well, what is normal? And why would you want it to go back to the way it used to be? And it's never going to be, even if this didn't happen, nothing ever goes back to the way it originally was. So if you're always wanting to go back to the past, you're always stuck in the past and no opportunity to grow. And everything always changes. Everything always changes.
Right.
What you always move at least a little bit, and you change a little bit. So if you're embracing that change, and that nothing is normal, and what is normal, and it could be the way you want it to be, but it's nothing never is normal. So yes, we want to be in a comfortable spot, so we don't have to think about it so much sometimes about what we're doing and how we're going to be. We can lulled back into a sort of trance-like state of, this is what we do, this is how we do it, which at times could be a really good thing, but at times it's now time to change that, and to not force everyone else to be in that same spot, to give everyone a voice, to have everyone, however they are, a chance to shine and be who they are. And regardless of their color, their gender, whatever it is that they want to, however they want to express themselves, why is it that we can't let someone else express it the way that they want to express, and let it be okay? And if we're still living in that fear of, oh, someone's a different color from us, and that can be a fearful thing, and someone's, oh, their gender is completely different, then that's fearful. And it's like, but that doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm still the person I am, and it doesn't hurt me to let them do whatever it is that they want to do, because it doesn't, in a way it affects me, but if it affects them in a positive way, that they get to be a better person, that affects me, for me to be inspired to be a better person. It doesn't keep me in a fearful spot of, oh, I still got to stay in this fearful, bad spot that they're still in, that we won't allow them to get out of. Then we have to use all of our energy to keep them in that spot. And so it's like, no, I want to grow, and I'll let everyone else grow too. It doesn't, it only affects me in a really positive way to let everyone else be who they are. Right. I can still be who I am and learn who I am, and to grow into that. That's a very loving and gentle, a more expansive, inspired space, which is where I really want to go to.
Which is very interesting to me. No accidents, right? When we go with the flow consciously, definitely no accidents. So definitely. On April 7th, today's the
5th.
The 5th. So in 2 days, they say that this astro infinity, says that the moon is at the apogee, which is when the energy is contracting. So the suggestion is to spend time doing something for the good of others, even in very small ways, because that helps us go towards our ultimate goal to be the best person that we each can be, which is basically what you're talking about. And then the full moon on the 16th is all about finding ways to balance one's personal needs and the needs of others, not wants, but needs. And part of that is letting go of the ego need to control what other people are doing.
Right. And it's going to be a Libra moon, which is generally associated with balance and feeling into all sides of
Moving out of the power struggles.
Yeah.
And going into the balance and going with the flow. So,
and I think the article also mentioned the days of the month where the moon is void.
Yes, it did.
Void, of course.
And to touch on that, moon void of course is when you want to be more focused on healing sessions, meditation, creative expressions such as writing poetry or songs or anything creative. And that's April 14th from parts of April 14th that they don't say which time zone it is. Oh, Mountain Standard Time. Okay. So Mountain is, so Eastern Time, that would be like 2:15 to about 5 o'clock. So approximately 2 to 5 on the 14th. And on the 16th, approximately 6 to 8:30. So that's Eastern Time. Subtract, go an hour earlier for Central, 2 hours early for Mountain, and 3 hours earlier for what is it in California? Pacific. And I think Hawaii is another 3 hours. And because I'm not traveling outside the country, I'm not going to try and figure it out. So go by Eastern Time. The next one is on, all these are in the evening except for one. Interesting. So basically, to make it simple, take time for healing and being creative and meditation on April 14th, April 16th, April 18th, April 20th, and then the 27th and the 29th. That's probably just the simple way to do it. So 14, 16, 18, 20, 27,
29.
Or go to the website if you want specific information. But I know about when I was in my 20s, I met someone and I studied with this particular meditation teacher, and he was of the perspective that you can meditate with every breath. And for some reason I decided, oh, that's really cool. So that's what I'm working towards, so that I'm centered at all times. Well, I think that goes hand in hand with staying present in the moment, going with the flow that's in the moment. So that's why the specific times for the moon void, of course, times, just do that all day, right? Have that be a focus of that particular day. So anyway, but yeah, so April 20th is when new life and new beginnings emerge. So it's a time to nurture what we're wanting to create And if that's being more fully present and going with the flow consciously, that energy is really strong around the 20th. But the 23rd is until the solar eclipse on the 30th, that last week of the month, is all about letting go of what no longer works. So again, what you've been talking about here, Sandy. Anyway, releasing negative or anxious thoughts, getting closure on relationships. So, and then ultimately, according to this person's perspective, we're being called to, with this solar eclipse, we're being called to acknowledge each one of our purposes individually, our own purpose in being here in this time of world history, which it certainly is tumultuous out there. So that kind of makes sense, is what is the piece that I choose to play in this?
The piece that I choose to play in this.
Yeah. So yeah, interesting things happening. So it feels like we're coming to a close now energetically. Everyone agree?
That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, ladies. This has been fun for me and interesting. And I hope you guys have a great week. I'm sure I'll talk with you during it. To our listeners, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please click like on the computer showing that you like this podcast. Please feel free to make any comments. Let's get a discussion going. What are your thoughts about what we've talked about? And if you're enjoying the wavelengths in our podcasts, please be sure to subscribe. I'm sure there's a little red button on your computer or your phone that lets you do that. If you subscribe, you'll know when we're posting new videos. All righty. Well, everyone have a great week and an amazing night.
And go with the flow.
Yeah, go with the consciously. Everyone take care, please.
Bye.
We hope you have enjoyed our roundtable discussion on going with the flow consciously. Please take a moment to visualize our planet Earth bathed in white light, everything within, on, and surrounding the planet filled with this white light, and all energies in whatever form moving into and staying balanced for the highest good of all concerned. Are you enjoying our podcasts? Be sure to add your comments below. Click on the thumbs up icon to like and the subscribe button to subscribe. Remember to share the link with friends